What could be more simple than just balancing reserve income with expected reserve expenses? Doesn't one equal the other? Well, it's actually not that simple. It all depends on your starting point. Is your reserve fund on track to having enough money for all its upcoming expenses? If not, you're in a weak position and you've got some catching up to do. Then you add the problem that all the expenses are based on estimates. And we all know about estimates. They're bound to be incorrect one way or another. So it's wise to have some margin for uncertainties. But of course, then you need to ask, how much margin? In this part of our Breaking Down Reserve Funding webinar, I'll introduce you to the funding goals that describe the size and strength of the reserve fund. And once you know this terminology, you'll be equipped to make wise choices based on your starting point and your desired margin. Now, I'll spend a few minutes at this point talking about the goals of a reserve funding plan. We'll do a little bit of the same thinking. What would be some good goals? All right? And whether it's a rule or a goal, I think it's a great goal. We'll just state it clearly. Have enough money. Have enough money to do the project that you need to do. All right? Sounds pretty simple. And don't get the board in trouble. That's a little bit like we said a moment ago with National Reserve Study Standards. Have it be fiscally responsible so the board can stand on firm ground. And then how about a goal is don't make it more expensive than it needs to be. So let's have the money. Let's have it be a responsible plan. And let's have it be good for the homeowner. So it's looking at kind of three different things here. And one very important point that I want to remind you of is that it's not just your plan. So anytime you're talking about the goals of reserve funding, remember that's not all up to you. Mother Nature and Father Time get a vote, and they really don't care about your plan. They're going to do what they do with your building. And you don't get to complain. You don't get to veto what they do. It's just going to happen. So remember, it's not just your plan. So that means you need to have some kind of margin, all right? And then you get to the question, well, how much margin is good? How much margin is not enough? How much margin is too much? Again, you don't want to be collecting arguably too much money from your homeowners. And so since it's not a direct answer, let's look at the statistics. And here's a chart that some of you who've attended prior webinars might have seen. It's the National Special Assessment Risk. And we did this, the last official analysis we did was in 2021. So this is based on about 50 or 60,000 data points from our clients across the country. And you can see that when an association has a reserve fund that is closer to 0% funded, they have a higher risk of special assessment. No surprise. And when the reserve fund is strong, out here above the 70% level, really special assessments are incredibly rare. So what that tells us, statistically speaking, is that generally it's risky out here about not having enough cash because there's more special assessments, and the special assessments happen when there isn't enough cash. And it's pretty safe out here in this range, and that kind of gives us an idea of more or less trouble. Where do I need to be to have the cash to do what I want to do? Okay, and so we compare it to National Reserve Study Standards. And National Reserve Study Standards lists three funding goals. They call them baseline, threshold, and full funding. And if I'm going fast, remember this is going to be recorded. As Paige said, we're going to have an outline after the program that we'll send in about a week. So try to keep up, but no big deal. We'll be able to supply you with the information you need. Anyway, baseline funding is where your target is just keep the reserve balance above zero. Pretty simple, but remember, expenses are based on estimates, and Father Time and Mother Nature get a vote in your plan. So there's good reason to have a little bit of margin. And full funding is where the reserve balance, the cash in the bank, cash and savings, is equal to the deterioration around the association. So you're trying to offset the expenses of what has happened. So it's a little bit higher amount of cash in the bank. And threshold is something that you choose in between, either a cash amount or a percent funded amount. So the bottom line is baseline ends up being risky, and full funding is towards the safe end of things. And I can show you here, full funding is aiming at being at this 100% funded point where the deterioration at the association is balanced by cash in the bank. And baseline funding is saying, hey, let's just stay above zero. Anything above zero is good. But looking at this chart, you and I can see there's trouble when you're near zero. So you might be thinking, let's not do that. And as a golfer, that reminds me of this kind of a golf shot. If you're standing here and you're trying to hit your approach shot to the pin on the green here, it's safe if you aim for the fat part of the green. It's risky if you're trying to hit the ball real close because you bring the bunker into play and you bring the water hazard into play. And I'm telling you, if you are standing here saying, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the water, it's a pretty good chance you're going to hit it in the water because that's where your brain is going. You want to be aiming safe. And so that's what I want to encourage you to do. Aim safe. Don't bring too much risk into play because remember, as a board member or a manager, you're taking risks with other people's money and the enjoyment of their homes. So don't do that. That's not what you're trying to accomplish here. So pick a safe target for your association. And also, when we're thinking about how much it's going to cost and don't make it too expensive for your homeowners, do your planning ahead. This is what it costs to fund a $250,000 roof project. If you plan ahead with budgeted funding and you get a little bit of interest from the bank, all it takes from the homeowners is, call it $232,000. The bank is going to pay the rest to get you to $250,000. If right before you need to do the project, you take out a loan, it's a 7-year loan at current bank association lending rates, it's going to cost you about $320,000. So that's about 320 over 230. It's about $90,000, $88,000 more expensive for your homeowners if you take out a loan. So yeah, you can do loans, but they're expensive. So thinking about it, have enough money. Yeah, pick your target. Don't get the board in trouble. Pick something responsible, not too risky, and plan ahead. Don't make it more expensive than it needs to be. At Association Reserves, we make the present less stressful and the future more secure. If you want to join us in this mission, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment down below on what you'd like to see us address in a future video. Let's plan for your best future.